So I just want to welcome all of you tonight to the Yellcrest Neighborhood Council meeting, February 9th, 2023. We're so glad to have our guest speakers with us. I want to also acknowledge we've got a few board members tonight. I see Jennifer Evans. Jennifer, raise your hand so everybody can see you. And I know some others are coming. They're going to be showing up a little later, but we'll acknowledge them. Just a couple of quick announcements before we start with Detective Fallows. And I think, Detective Fallows, you've got to run a ballpark tonight. Is that right? Yeah. So I'm going to just do a few quick announcements, and then we're going to get right underway. First of all, as you drive around Yellcrest, please notice the new street topper signs that designate our local historic districts. We have 6, and I posted a picture of one of them on our Facebook page. I'm going to put more on our website. And if you're wondering what they are, if you go to the corner, for example, of 17th East and Princeton, you'll see the street sign. And on top of that street sign is this brown topper sign that says Princeton Park, which is one of our LHDs. And there's 6 different sort of districts around Yellcrest. I want to Keep Yellcrest for that initiative. They are the ones who are responsible for pushing that through. And then Dan Dugan, our city councilman, I think pushed it across the finish line. And these are in addition to those beautiful cast bronze signs that we talked about last month that are in the ground that welcome you as you come and enter Yellcrest at different points. Secondly, we're seeing a rash of pranksters who are going into our electrical boxes and turning off the electricity. And this is a very dangerous matter. It's especially harmful for people who are on medical electrical devices, and for the elderly, it's frightening for them. And we've thought about maybe doing an educational initiative out to the schools. We don't know if we'll undertake that. It's something we've talked about. At the very least, I would strongly urge you, and maybe Detective Fallows can address this, to get a lock on your electrical box. We had a hearing this week in the city council about ADUs. It's been a lot of interest to those of us in this neighborhood, and I think Dan probably can address that. And there are a lot of other announcements, but I'm going to let our guest speakers tonight go ahead and talk about those. And Detective Fallows, I've unmuted you. So you are now unmuted. There you go. You've got your voice. And what we're going to do now is hear from Detective Fallows. And when he's finished, Hannah, just go ahead and step right in and begin your presentation. And then when you're finished, we'll just roll right over to Dan. So please, Detective Fallows.
Perfect. Thank you. It's good to be here with you guys tonight. Real quick, I'll just address the power outage with people turning off the power real quick so I don't forget that. I think that's a great idea, Jan. Just make sure you can lock them. It's probably the best option. Obviously, people can defeat locks if they want to, but most likely, if yours is locked, they're just gonna like move on to another house. If that happens, you can absolutely call the police to have us come kind of check the area, because like Jan said, it can have some very serious implications for people that, you know, require machines and things like that for oxygen, things like that. And so if that's happening, absolutely let us know. So we can kind of come out and at least drive to the area and see if we can find who's doing it, or at a minimum, just be a presence in your neighborhood to kind of hopefully cut down on it. Because, you know, they'll hide from house to house or whatever, and that's fine. But if they see the police, usually they'll kind of take off. So, and then with the stats this month, our website had a few problems. So I'm not sure if these are 100% accurate, but I was able to get some. So we'll just go with what I was able to get. We're getting that worked out for next month. But so we're looking at the month of January. We had, there was only 6 reported crime types. So that's why I kind of think it's probably not super accurate, because there was some issues with the website today. But we had 6 total reported crime types. The biggest, and then, sorry, for everyone here, Salt Lake City tracks well, all crimes obviously, but for the purposes of any kind of crime data that's public information, they track part 1 and part 2 crimes, and all this can be found on our website. And I'm going to go ahead and put a bunch of links in the chat for everybody. All this can be found on our website. You can kind of play around with the different crime stats for the different neighborhoods and different community councils. But so this, for the month of January, we had 6 total. The main ones that stood out were like larceny and thefts. There were 4 of those, and vandalism. So again, a lot of the crimes that we see are property related. It's a good reminder to like make sure we're locking up our vehicles, taking things of value out of them. And if you see something suspicious or someone suspicious, meaning like someone pulling on door handles, maybe 11 o'clock at night in your neighborhood, you happen to be up and you see people, going car to car, call us, call our non-emergency, or if they're in a car, they're actively breaking into a car, breaking a window, something like that, call 911 and let us know. So we can obviously come out and try and make an arrest on that. So I can't remember if I highlighted it here or not. It's been a month or 2 now, but recently we had in another district, someone called for just a suspicious vehicle that had been in their neighborhood for some time, for a few hours. And it was just kind of odd to the person. They didn't really recognize the vehicle. So they called us and we were able to go out and make contact with the driver. Turned out that the vehicle was stolen, and that we were able to make an arrest. And then the person we arrested ended up being linked to like several other cases in the city for stolen vehicles. So sometimes those simple calls can actually be really, really helpful to help us resolve cases for other people and get their property back. So
that was here in Yellowcrest?
no, it was not. It was District 7. It was Sugar House.
Okay.
So not super far, but I just wanted to highlight the importance of calling, on just those minor things that seem kind of minor to us, like, I won't worry about it, but it could lead to like, something better. So suspicious vehicles, suspicious people that might be like looking at mailboxes or pulling on door handles, things like that. We want to know more about their actions, obviously, what the person is doing that's suspicious more than anything. But yeah, if you see someone walk to your neighbor's house, walk in the backyard and start looking in the windows, it might be a good time to call the police, so if you know that they don't live there. So and then for some of the links that I put in there, for any of the people that might own businesses in the Yellowcrest area, and for any homeowner as well, we have our no trespass affidavit program where you can sign a trespass affidavit and have that on file with the city. And then you can, we sell the signs, the city issued trespass signs that are no trespass signs that are, they just sell them at cost. So depending on how much the bulk of signs that they bought is how much they cost. I think they're around $30 right now, but you can get those signs and put them up. And that allows us as the police department to take immediate action without having to have any previous warnings given to that individual. And even without you even having to be there. So like if you're a business owner and you put those up in your business and overnight, 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that, someone is on the property camping or just, loitering or something like that, we can actually just make contact with them directly without having to have, that is the permission from the business owner, essentially, or those signs and that affidavit. So that's a really good program for us. Our East Side Bike Unit has had a lot of success with a lot of businesses down in like the ballpark area and Sugar House and other areas where we have the trespass signs a lot. They've made some pretty big arrests and stuff like that based on that. So
So we had a question in the chat. How would they get that sign? Just go down to the police department?
Yeah, well, there's a couple ways. So first, you're going to want to fill out the trespass affidavit form that can be found on our website. Or if you just Google SLCPD trespass, I think it's the second link down. It's an actual form that you print and fill out, and you will have to get it notarized. Then you'll bring that down to the police department, and you'll go to our records window in the lobby, and you'll just file that with them. And then they have the signs right then and there that you can purchase and go and put those up immediately. And so it's a really good program that we've had a lot of success with to kind of help mitigate some of the issues that we have, without having to like contact a business owner or a homeowner and be like, hey, does this person, are they supposed to be here? What do you want done with them? Like all these things, we can just take action immediately. And it could be anything from like moving the person on to making an arrest and taking them to jail. So all that gambit of different things that we have an option to do now because we have the affidavit on file. And then I know I talk a lot about the getting accurate stats reported in the areas and in the neighborhoods and stuff like that. So just as a reminder, if you do have something minor, we would love to have you report it to us. To make it a little bit easier for people, we have an online reporting system, or hopefully easier. I've heard sometimes it's a little bit harder to use, but if you go online, there's lots of different things you can report, like vandalisms, thefts, things like that, where there's really no suspect information, but it did happen, and you want to make sure that we're getting accurate stats for your neighborhood. You can report that online. It's very simple, and obviously on your time, any time of the day or night. And I still, when I pull my stats and put everything together, or when the city does that, it counts still towards what's going on. So, because those are like reports essentially. So that's really helpful for me, because that helps me drive my resources to where I need them, and things like that. So
Really quickly, coffee with a cop.
yep, I was just about to bring it up.
Good.
Yeah, lastly, I'll just talk about that. We have a coffee with a cop coming up. For those of you that may not know what that is, essentially the police department has a program through our community outreach team, with the PR team, where they schedule a sit down at a coffee, like some kind of a local coffee shop. So this one will be at the Starbucks at Foothill Village, 1440 Foothill Drive. We're going to be there from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. on Thursday, February 16th. I'm going to see if I can put this.
And you'll be there, right?
I will be there. Yep, I will be there, and we will have. Oh, look at that in the chat. So I put the information in the chat there, a little flyer for everybody. February 16th, 10 to 11:30 a.m. It's basically an opportunity to come and just talk to us, spend some time with the police officer, ask him any questions. It could be the hard ones, like, or just suggestions. Like, these are really for us to sit down, connect with the community, and just try and see how we can do things better, or just simply just sit down and chat with us, like whatever you guys want to do. So it's a really good opportunity for that. So again, Thursday, February 16th, from 10 to 11:30 at the Starbucks at Foothill Village.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll let you run. And we'll turn.
I can take some questions if anybody has any questions real quick before I go, if you have time for that.
I think you did a great job.
Okay.
We can contact you if some end up coming, we can also let you know and get back.
Absolutely.
To you. And Hannah,
Perfect.
I'm gonna unmute you. So, whoops. Okay.
Did it work? Okay. Thanks, Jan.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Barton with the Mayor's Office. It's great to be with all of you. It does feel like it's been a couple months, so happy to be here. I will be quick. First, I wanted to announce an event this month that I'm very excited about. The mayor is coming to a meeting with all of the District 6 community councils on Monday, February 27th. That will be at Uinta Elementary School, which is 1571 East, 13th South, but I'm sure you all know where it is. And that will be from 6 to 7:30 p.m. This is a great chance to chat with the mayor, ask questions. Councilmember Dugan will also be there as well. So it's a meeting with both of them, which is great. And we've been doing these in each of the city council districts throughout the city. The mayor obviously loves meeting with the community councils one-on-one, but realized that this year will quickly come to a close. And so she wanted to try and, broaden her reach. And luckily the community councils were kind enough to host kind of these combined meetings of all the city councils in each district. So that will be a great opportunity. There will be Q&A with the mayor and remarks from her as well, and Councilmember Dugan. And yeah, so it'll be a great opportunity. I hope you all can make it and invite your neighbors and your friends, anyone else in District 6, and feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about that event. Also wanted to let you all know, I'm sure you have all seen by now that, let's see. Oh, yes, I will put the date and time for that meeting in the chat so everyone can see it. Let's see. I'm sure you all have seen that the Larry H. Miller family has decided to take the bees to daybreak. So they will be leaving Salt Lake, which obviously we are disappointed in, but understand that it's a business decision, and the mayor doesn't want to waste any time and wants to quickly move on the potential of, this new 13 acres of land that's going to be opening up in the ballpark neighborhood. So the mayor, let's see, midway through January announced the Ballpark Next design competition, which is a chance for residents, post-secondary students, and developers to submit design ideas for that ballpark area, whether that's just reusing the ballpark for something new, or adding different things, different amenities to that location. We really just want to see that part of the city blossom and turn into something that can be used 365 days a year. So anyone is able to submit design ideas to that competition, and there's actually money on the table, reward money for the best ideas. So I'll put that link in the chat as well. Let's see. Additionally, the mayor had her State of the City address a couple of weeks ago. For any of you who missed it, I will put a link in the chat so you can watch the recording of that. But it was a great chance to talk about her priorities for the year. And she announced an exciting partnership with the Larry H. Miller family. They are investing $100 million into the ballpark neighborhood of Salt Lake, which is very exciting and is kind of a reflection of their commitment to that neighborhood, even though they're taking the bees. So that'll be exciting to see a lot of hopefully positive changes in that part of the city. And we're all very excited about that. And lastly, just wanted to announce SLC Sustainability reached out to me today and let me know that they have a food equity microgrant program, which is launching today, actually. It is a grant that is open to both individuals and organizations to support local food production and other efforts to increase food equity. They, on their website, which I'll put the link in the chat, they talk about, like, if you want to build a chicken coop or if you want to start a garden, things like that to increase food equity throughout the city. So that's a fun grant program that is open to all of you or to the community council as an organization as well. And those applications are due March 5th. So reach out to me with any questions about that. And that's all I have, but I'm happy to take questions from anyone.
Great idea. I think chickens are cheaper than eggs right now.
Yeah, no kidding. And then you're gonna find little pet.
I see that Dan just came.
Oh, perfect timing.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, Dan. You can't talk because I've muted you, but so if there are no questions for Hannah, we are going to slide right over to, and Hannah, thank you so much.
Thanks,
We
Jen.
look forward to the meeting with the mayor on the 27th, and we'll be sure to promote that. I'm gonna mute you now, and then I'm gonna unmute Dan, and if I can do this right.
There we are.
There we go, Dan.
Apologize for being late.
No, you're right on time.
Yeah, I wish I'd heard Hannah. So thank you for everyone for being here tonight. I love the agenda we have on going after this, so I'll be short. Tuesday night, we had the ADU discussion at City Council. Jan, I saw your recap or newsletter. It was a good discussion at the City Council level, and it was also, we had, I think, 18 commenters that night, plus all the emails that we received from across the city. So I appreciate all the engagement, everybody. I still want to press a couple issues and see if I can change some votes. You need 4, right? Because you got to have 4. And I want to make sure I want to press the height restriction, and I want to continue pressing the size. I think 720 is more of a reasonable size, and that's also the size that of a detached garage can be. And then the setbacks. I don't know how successful I'll be at all those, because a couple of them were pretty strong on one side, but those are the ones I want to press, and I want to firm up the owner occupancy. I will say I got some data for 2022. D6, we had 1 external ADU approved in our district, just 1. And over the last 4 years, we've had 18, if you count the D6 from last the last, before we did redistricting boundaries. So we've had 18 over the last 4 years, and across the city, I think just less than across the city, there's been 44 completed and 36 are under construction on the ADU side. So those are the numbers that are for ADUs, but we still have a couple weeks to make some calls, and that's my plan right now for that. As far as the affordable housing, with the legislators are keeping us busy on a number of fronts. So I think that's some of that stuff has just been delayed because we just don't have the staff bandwidth right now to handle everything that we got, especially with the legislators throwing things at us across the board. But the biggest thing right now, we're trying to make sure that we get the shelter mitigation funding increased, and that piece strong, and we're still pressing hard on that one with Wayne Niederhauser and others to make sure that we have that. I spoke about that last week at the committee hearing, at the appropriation committee hearing. So I'm going to keep it short at that. Yes, we have a lot of things going on. Appreciate the dialogue. You know where to find me, and I look forward to the conversation on Miller Park.
Really quick, Dan, just a couple of things, and Kat, we'll roll to you in just a second. Tell me how much influence, or can the public still influence or get comments? We can certainly get comments to the city council, because I think you're going to take ADU up and probably vote on it on the 21st. Is that correct, or is that something you don't know yet?
No, it's right now. Well, I think it's, things can always change, but right now I think it's on the schedule for the 21st, because that's the next time we have a formal meeting. This next meeting on the 14th is just a RDA and a work session. So, you can always, I mean, I think I know where we sit, so it's not, you could always have friends call the other council members if you want to. But it's hard to do it by email, just because we get inundated with a lot of those emails. And they saw all the emails.
That
Yeah,
was
they
my
should.
question, because we know we send things to you, but I don't know if they get circulated to the other council members.
Yeah, and anything that gets sent to me, Taylor reads, and I always send it to Taylor, and then she puts it in the public comment period, public comments. So yeah, anything that gets sent to me will, in that case, goes to the public comment. And we get an email with all the this Excel spreadsheet with all the emails and addresses and who sent them with the comments on one side. So we see them all together at one time, if they're not coming directly to you. So
you understand, Dan, what it's like to get inundated with things. And as a council person, what is the most effective way to communicate an opinion to you, which would be applicable to other council members? What is the best approach?
An email is a good approach. The one thing I would say about emails, especially, is keeping them short. Good concise bullet points are really helpful. And an ask, but be concise, because if it's a page long, it's really hard to read, 10 pages of emails when you get 20 of the same. So a concise email. And if you have an email, like when you wrapped up a bunch of comments in one email, you sent something, I can't remember exactly, just this past week or so, you wrapped up a bunch of people's comments. That's good, as long as we can keep it kind of like short. And that's helpful, because we can digest it and we can go, okay, yeah, I got it. But you can always, the phone calls is just hard, just because you're playing phone tag.
Last but not least, I wanted to just pick up, and Kat, we're almost ready to go to you. Yeah. And that is the meeting we had with Suzanne Harrison, the Salt Lake County Commissioner, over at the sports complex, to see if we could you know, kind of move along the phase 3, the so-called phase 3 build out of the sports complex. That would include a senior citizen center, some community meeting rooms, some other things. We've even tacked on, it could be a home for the library. That may be very futuristic and aspirational, but nonetheless a concept. You know, we want to follow that up, Dan. Any suggestion to us about the best next steps? Because as those who are on the call tonight, there's, you know, the sports complex, even though it says it's the county, the city, and Dan, you can correct me, the city actually owns it.
Right. They just run the
The county
maintenance.
operates it or maintains it.
Right. And so the next step, and I've mentioned it to our staff, is that we probably need to get with the mayor's, whether it's Parks and Rec or others, or their economic development, or somebody on their team to have a meeting of the minds on where we go from there, because it is a parks kind of issue. It's a library issue, so it touches a bunch of different, you know, of different departments. So I've asked them to see what we can do is internally have a meeting so we can, what is our next step here to go forward with that. So I have it on my radar already, but thank you very much. I got couple more things, just sorry.
Go ahead.
House Senate Bill 105. This is a traffic enforcement bill. Senate Bill 105. Senator Jerry Stevens is a sponsor of this bill. This is a bill that we wanted to use for cameras in around schools areas and construction zones, then maybe red lights. It's going to probably go to committee next week. That's always up in the air. But this is one of those things where if you can call your senator, whether it's Plum or Nate or Karen Kwan or any senator that you know, and just kind of say, hey, we really support this bill. We think it's good. Think of kids' safety. Think of traffic as far as speeds. And this has got a lot of things going for it. But there's still some people that are hesitant in supporting it. So if you know people, call your senators, tell them if you support it. Again, when you talk to the senators or the representatives, you got to mention the House bill or the Senate bill. So Senate Bill 105 and the sponsor, because that's the language they speak. And that's yeah.
Thank you. We will use another time and occasion to talk about neighborhood byways. Because we had a meeting on that as well with the transportation department. And that's something I think that the neighborhood would like to be engaged with. We may do a walkthrough. But thank you, Dan. We'll keep up with all these things. I'm going to unmute you if that's okay. And now I'm going to go to Kat. And Kat, if I can unmute you. Oh, dear.
How's this? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. And I also
Awesome.
think I want to make you, hang on here. Whoops. That was a mistake. I want to go over here, Kat, and make you a co-host. So that if
Perfect.
you have anything that any kind of screen you want to share with us. Everyone, this is Kat with a K. And I think Catherine's, the K stands for Catherine or something.
Yes, Catherine.
Kat is a planner with the Public Lands Department. Very important presentation tonight on Miller Park. And without further ado, and some of the improvements from the CIP grant that are going to be available to us as a community. And Kat, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope you can all see my screen here. But thank you so much for having me tonight. This is a really exciting project. As Jan mentioned, my name is Kat Moss. I'm a public lands planner for the city. So I am presenting today on behalf of the city. And I believe Jim Webster will follow me up. He is the constituent representing the original application. So with that, I'm just going to kind of dive in and I'll go quickly through this project. see if I can change. There we go. So I'm just going to start with a brief background. Going back a few years prior to this application being submitted, as a result of an oil spill that impacted Miller Park in 2010, the city was awarded money to complete projects to mitigate the impacts of the spill. The projects occurred around 2014 and included the relocation of a trail on the east side of the park from Creekside to adjacent to the walls, as well as some other modifications. And this CIP application, the scope that's copied and pasted directly from the application is here on the screen. But this CIP application proposed modifications that could not be accomplished during this time, and as a response to some of the changes of that 2014 project, which include the relocation of the trail. So the CIP request itself, it's a 2017 constituent submitted CIP application that was funded for $425,000. And the scope of work for this project listed here, and I can share the slideshow potentially with Jan after so that you all can have a little bit deeper dive into it. But requests modifications to the walking paths within the park. So yeah, I'll share this so you guys can take a little bit of a look later. So there were two goals originally stated for this constituent CIP project, and those were to preserve the historic structures that include the WPA Works Progressive Era masonry walls, the footbridge, and the stairways. And then the second goal was to improve accessibility of the trail system that navigates the park. And the constituent proposed in his application 3 strategies to fulfill these goals, both of them. And they included restoring that trail alignment that was rerouted in 2014 that I mentioned, to install a walking bridge over Red Butte Creek, and to stabilize the historic WPA walls. So now kind of moving on to where we are today. Once this project was approved, there were, as you can imagine, since this was a 2017 application, quite a few delays on this project. However, ultimately Alta Planning and Design was hired as a consultant on the project. They're on the project right now to assist with some engagement efforts, as well as structural and geotechnical assessment of the park elements that were involved in the project that was applied for. So upon completing geotechnical and structural assessments of the trails and the walls, it was determined that the strategy of relocating the trail that was proposed in the original CIP project to reestablish the streamside alignment of the trail would not, in fact, fulfill the goals listed in the application. We've received reports and letters from the firms involved that clearly make the statement, and the reports are posted on our website. We are just getting final signatures on those 2 letters, so they should be posted on our website as well within the week. And I'll update Jan when those get posted so she can share out with this group. And then in addition to those letters and reports, the engineering firms made recommendations for a list of projects that would in fact fulfill the 2 goals of the original project, which included projects listed here with these kind of themes that would improve trail slopes, improve accessibility, improve WPA wall foundations, remove structural loads from the tops of the walls, and would also protect and improve the current trails. So these kind of 5 categories led to 12 individual projects or strategies that were proposed by the 2 engineering firms. And I'll go into those in detail now. And just for reference, as we kind of go through these are only project concepts that were proposed by our expert consultants. Once these projects are prioritized through community engagement, which I'll talk about in a minute, and if they are selected to move forward by the City Council, these selected projects will go through a very detailed design project, which will also loop in the community for that project, including survey work and full detailed design before we begin any construction on any of these projects. So I'll just go into these projects really quickly. These first 2 address trail protection. So this first one, Project A, repairs and replaces crib walls, which is kind of a fancy engineering way of saying this outer portion of the trail that holds up the current trail. They are in disrepair and causing erosion and access issues. So the first project is to repair those. And Project B reinforces buttresses and replaces more crib walls on the east side of the trail to improve drainage and mitigate for erosion issues. And these projects would address the original goals by improving the safety and access throughout the park. Then the second set of projects, C, D, and E, address current trail slopes, which are currently not in compliance with ADA standards. These projects involve regrading the trail, and Project C involves covering the historic wall foundation. And then Project E improves Bonneview Drive entrance to the park, making it ADA accessible. The next project here improves safe access throughout the park. So projects F and G address current safety issues with steep slopes and unsafe stairs that are currently present in the park. And then Project H addresses an ADA accessible entrance to the Bonneview Drive entrance of the park. So just for a little clarification, Project F here is a new set of stairs on a very steep slope just after the bridge on the east side of the trail. And Project G is reconstruction of the stairs that are already in place that we're having some issues with now. So that would increase safety in those two areas. And then our final two sets of projects here address the historic wall preservation. Project I proposes the removal of a stacked concrete wall near the 900 South entrance that is putting a load that was not intended on top of the original WPA walls. According to the Salt Lake County Surveyor's Office, this is on city-owned property. However, if this project is identified as a community priority, we would absolutely do very detailed survey work and work very closely with the community to ensure that this would be on city-owned property. And then let me see. Yeah, the WPA walls were not built to be able to hold a load of this size. And then in addition, Project J proposes removal of non-native trees that are atop the wall that are also providing a load that the walls were not intended to hold initially. Public Lands does realize potential concerns with both of these projects. So please, as I talk about this survey coming up, please provide your opinions on these and all of the projects in the survey that I talk about in a minute. And then finally, these last two projects, K and L, both involve structural work on the walls by covering a foundation that is currently exposed, and then also using stabilization tools such as soil nails to stabilize the walls and protect them from further damage. So now the fun part, if I can change my screen. Ooh. So as I mentioned, we really want your input on all of these projects. In order to understand which of these projects and the goals listed in the CIP are a priority for the community, we are opening a survey. It is actually open now as of the beginning of this meeting to request all of your input and the community's input. The survey, there are opportunities to weigh in on all of the 12 projects that I've discussed today. There are links to a lot more detailed information about each of these projects, including potential cost estimates, environmental impacts, as well as how each of the individual projects specifically fulfills the original goals in the CIP. And I will drop those graphics in the chat as well as a link to the website when Jim and Jan finish up their presentation, as well as a link to the survey, but you can also access it here. So that is open now. Let me just see. Also in this survey, there's an opportunity to prioritize the projects you like, but there's also an opportunity to list other projects that are a high priority for this community and express concerns with the projects that are listed. So there's an opportunity to prioritize these projects, provide input on concerns, and then also please provide other priorities that you have that are outside of these goals that are listed. We do understand that there are many projects in Miller Park that folks want to prioritize, and we absolutely want to hear about those in the survey. However, when City Council allocated these funds to this Miller Park project specifically in 2017 to specifically address historic structure preservation and access improvements. So that is why these specific projects are being investigated now with this funding. Also, please note that these are just project concepts. As I mentioned, there will be further engagement down the line as we work through design, but this just provides an initial idea of community priorities that fall within the 2 goals of this funding source. This project will be open, or the survey will be open for 1 month until March 9th, at which point Public Lands will submit a written brief to City Council outlining the results of the survey, as well as all of the other responses that we receive regarding priorities and concerns with other projects and current projects. And then based on the community engagement, this brief will recommend projects for City Council to prioritize for use of this funding. Ultimately, it will be the decision of City Council to determine how these funds will be utilized with this new information from our engineering firms and the public engagement. There will be a public hearing on this item when the time comes, and I will be in contact with Jan when a date is set for that. So there'll be more opportunity for public input, absolutely. And then, as mentioned, City Council will make the final decision regarding the projects, but this initial survey will let us know the community priorities within this scope and other priorities that lie outside of the scope of this project. So thank you all so much for your time. There's a lot more information about this project on our website and within the survey. And as always, if you have questions, you can email myself. I'll drop my contact information in the chat, or of course, publiclands@slcgov.com, and that will make its way to the correct folks. And then I will be here for a Q&A session at the end of the next 2 presentations. But feel free, reach out if there is anything else you all need. Otherwise, I will turn the time over to Jim and Jan. And thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll drop some stuff in the chat.
Before you leave, I understand that you've set up some in-person event.
Yes,
on the
we do. We will have our community engagement folks tabling. They'll have big boards with the projects outlined in all of the ones that I just went over, and they'll be in the survey. And those are at the Anderson Foothill Library on February 15th and February 21st from about 1:30 to 4. And I'll drop that in the chat as well. So feel free to stop by. It'll kind of be a sticker activity, so folks can provide written comment in person, put stickers on projects that they are in favor of, write notes on projects that are not included in this list, and also provide input on projects they have concerns with.
Yeah, and I would like to see maybe kind of a crossover cooperative event with you, because I think as a community, we also have some strong feelings. I don't want to necessarily create an event outside of what you're doing. I think we want to try to do as much together as possible, because I was hoping that we would have some kind of community event. These certainly, help fill that requirement. We may want to do something additional, which would not take anything away from what you're trying to do. Our perspective may be slightly different, and we've talked about that, Kat. And not that we're going in a different direction, but I think that we are passionate about some things that we've seen in the park and what we think those solutions might be. And it doesn't mean that you don't agree with us. It's just we understand some of the limitations of the grant and what its purpose was, and whether we can really, go beyond that. I wanted to say, and I forgot to say this actually before you started, but to be sure, and I think because we're going to get in a Q&A period, and obviously we have our typical requests of everyone that we're civil and we're respectful of one another, and I wanted to say too that the whole intent tonight is just to be educational and to inform. We are not going to take votes on anything. We're not going to decide. We're not going to make any decisions about these proposals. This is a process, and the process is probably going to go on for several months or however long it takes. And so I don't want everybody to know and not feel uncomfortable that we're rushing to finish something. And certainly we want to see an endpoint, because it started 7 years ago. No, well, 6, I don't know, whatever the time frame. It's been going on for a while and we do want to sort of get to the finish line and that will be important. So I just wanted to make that point. And now, Jim, do I see you out there? Are you on the call? He can't talk because I've probably muted him. Hang on just a minute. But thank you so we will be able to ask Kat some questions, but we're going to hold off on the Q&A until after Jim, who was the original applicant for the CIP grant and is a Yellcrest resident. Many of you probably know Jim, and Jim, I'm looking, oh, there you are, I see. Okay, Kat, I'm going to mute you right now.
Thank you all. Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, so Jim. I'm not doing this very well. I should be able to unmute you, Jim. And I'm having a heck of a time. I'm supposed to be able to click on your mute button, Jim, and have you. This is becoming too complicated. So. Jim, can you unmute yourself? Jim, if you can hear me, can you unmute yourself? Jim? We're having a devil of a time here. Not going according to plans. And I don't know what the problem is. I've just changed the security feature that enables Jim to just automatically unmute himself. Maybe I can go in here and do something that I'm not doing. And I know nobody can help me because you're all muted.
Weirdly, it let me unmute myself. So I don't know if it'll let Jim. Maybe he's on his cell phone and he's having troubles. I don't know.
Yeah, let me, so I'm going to make Jim a co-host. So Jim, I've made you a co-host, but I've also unmuted you. And maybe Jim dropped off.
And Jan, I just sent him a text.
Okay. So asked to unmute, I've unmuted him, or I've tried to. Oh dear, this is really complicated. I've been able to unmute everybody on this call. And I don't know why in the security, they've been allowed, I hit the security button that says they've been allowed to unmute themselves. So everyone is allowed to unmute themselves now. I am sorry for this glitch, and I'm not sure.
Working. This is Tom.
Yeah,
So it looks like
Tom, can you help Jim?
I'll call him.
Okay. Well, I wish we had music or something, but we don't.
You didn't prepare a song?
Hold on one second.
You would
Jan,
know.
I'm talking to Jim right now. I'll be with you in a second.
Okay. So I've given everybody the opportunity to unmute themselves. So we enable that feature on our call. And so all of you should be able to do that automatically. And why Jim is not able to do that, I don't know.
Jan,
Yeah,
I just told him to go off the meeting and come back on because he was having trouble unmuting himself on his phone. So
Okay.
maybe he had some glitch. So I said, leave the meeting, rejoin, and hopefully he'll have that access to unmute himself.
great. Great, okay, well, we're just kind of at a little pause here. And I don't see Jim. Is Jim back on yet? Sorry for this, folks. Looks like Kat has shared a file with us. Okay. And is Jim back on? I know Jim likes to use his phone instead of his computer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
sometimes,
he was having trouble unmuting himself on his phone, but he's just rejoined.
okay, Jim. Can you unmute? Tom, can you run over to Jim's house? And, and borrow, let him borrow your phone? Are you there, Tom?
Yeah, I'm here. If you really are serious, I guess I could.
I don't know how long that would take.
Yeah, it'd take too long, I think.
I don't know why that feature isn't working. It's very strange. Any techno savvy people out there?
My only other suggestion would be having Councilmember Dugan put his phone on speaker and Jim could chat through the call.
Okay. Hey, great idea, Kat. You're
Now,
you can keep your day job. It's a great idea. We're gonna hire you for some other things, okay?
now he's not picking up his phone, so
Oh, dear. Well, this is not going according to plan.
I'm gonna do that now. Here we go, hold on. Okay, Jim, you're on the phone. Okay, can everybody hear me? Can you hear him?
It's pretty quiet.
Jeez. Can you guys hear Jim?
He needs to
Can
start.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, Jim. Okay, you can hear me? Yes. Okay. Can you hear me now as well? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I really don't know where to start on this. I mean, I can go back just a little bit and remind people that there were no trails in Miller Park subsequent to 1987. 1987, John Gus hired a firm out of Portland, Mitchell Nelson Group, and we put in the lower bridge, put in all of the timber walls, all of the crib block walls, stairs going down to the lower bridge, and we put in the lower path. Now that path was 4 feet wide, and it functioned from 1987 until after the oil spill. It was still active after the oil spill. Perfectly functional and safe, and the city risk management people were heavily involved in the project. It was fine. Everybody seemed to agree. I had the idea of restoring or maintaining that along with a lot of other neighbors. Brad Parker wrote the petition. It was signed by Senator Garn. It was signed by Randy Horiuchi, sitting council member at Salt Lake County. It was signed by the school board
president, Laurel Young. It was signed by President Eugene Hansen and Elder Whistler. It was just, there were 150 signatures because we had gotten word that the city wanted to get, or was considering getting rid of that lower path. And we signed this petition stating that we insisted on maintaining that lower path, that was critical. Bear in mind that Minnie Miller donated the park for the children of Salt Lake as a bird habitat and a bird preserve. Her intention was to deal with that. Currently, what we have is an off-leash dog park, unfortunately. But I think that's critical because last fall, I noticed 6 different classes of kids down there from the Gillis School, from Roland Hall, from Uinta, from Bonneville. And, you know, it's heavily used. That lower path is not wide enough to accommodate very many people right now, but it is in place. That's the reason that lower timber wall was built. And the entire purpose of my CIP grant, which I began working with Lewis Bowden in 2016, so it was 7 years ago. It wasn't formally funded until the first part of January in 2017. But nonetheless, I worked with Lewis and we had decided we would do boardwalks and so forth. But the whole idea, I don't know what you've ever seen in the application, but it's very clear that CIP proposal layout was for the lower path and only for the lower path. It was never a consideration in any of our minds that there would ever be an upper path. And the reason for that is the city does not own the property. It's interesting that you're now saying that city's going to do detailed survey. Well, that will be the first time because there's a lot of pathways that are actually on private property. And so, you know, it's difficult for me to understand why, you know, somebody came to the conclusion, and I might not quote you exactly, but that the lower path would not fulfill the objectives of the CIP. Let me put it another way. The objective of the CIP and the only objective of the CIP was to restore and reinstate that lower path. Now, there was other considerations with respect to the fragility of the WPA walls, and that's because the city undercut them and exposed the footings. Okay, it wasn't due to erosion. I don't know where that notion came from. It was due to the city's purposeful undercutting of those footings. So that was a component of it. The ADA access began in the 1980s, that idea of ADA access. We just didn't have enough money in 87 to do that. So I included that to perpetuate the idea. And I was working with Christine Passy in the mayor's office throughout this process. And I don't understand why the ADA is now thrown under the bus, because what's the point in making the eastal side ADA compliant and then forcing people over next to the WPA wall all along Military Drive and down stairs that are not and never will be code compliant? Okay, and before the stairs came, it was just a ramp. Some of you may remember that. If you wanted to do, I think it's item G, or no, which one is it? G, I think. Where you're talking about stairs and landings. If you were to do that, according to code, you would be clear past the oxbow area, that flat area down there. And you'd have to bring in probably somewhere in the nature of 80 to 100 cubic feet of fill, maybe a lot more than that. That's maybe, well, it'd probably be something like 4 or 5 truckloads to accomplish that according to the drawing, which is entirely inaccurate. It's interesting that the city didn't do a survey and not realize before they got to a certain point where they had to dive this ramp down that slope that they really couldn't trespass on private property. So I think that's the only thing that I'm really concerned about is why is it that we just thrown the lower path out with the baby in the bathwater or whatever? Because that was the sole purpose of the CIP. And I think a lot of people are anticipating that that really should be reinstated. So I don't know how people feel about it, but I have obviously pretty strong feelings. Any questions or anything?
Well, we are going to have a Q&A, Jim, and we're going to get to that right away. I just thank you, Jim. And for everybody's information, Jim, lives on Military, and he was a former chair of the Oak Crest Neighborhood Council. I think you started it actually, Jim. But
Well, I was in, let me put it, Dan, I don't know whether you have the original application that we submitted, but it really only focuses on the lower path. So I don't know how all these other projects are part of what has become a CIP that is totally foreign to anything that I submitted. But I think it would be helpful if people had access to the actual application.
Kat wants to answer your question, Kat.
Yes, I have the one that was originally submitted and I can circulate that. I believe it was posted on our website and if not, I'll make sure that it is back up there, but we have a copy of that we can share around.
I wanted, just before we get to the Q&As, just kind of throw out a couple of things. And I don't want to go through a lot of this, but we've already talked about the oil spill in 2010, then the Chevron oil spill. And then in 2014, the decision was made by the city to go and do a major renovation of the park. As a result of that, that is a whole questionable matter. They really had not found in the water or in the soil any residue, but nonetheless, it was done. And just so you know, there was quite a bit of impact to the park in 2014. A third of the trees were taken out. They diverted the stream while they reconfigured the stream. Took a bulldozer up at the gut of the park. It was a 5-foot big stream. It became a 20-foot wide stream, creating very narrow slopes, which caused slope erosion. And so just a lot of trauma to the park. We lost vegetation, and then successively, because the intent was to really wipe out the non-native plants, and that was the intent, that was Biohabitat's intent, to continue to cut trees and poison them with things like tordon and other chemicals. And hundreds of trees, some of them were saplings, granted, but this went on annually. And I want to just hear a statement. I've talked with about a dozen conservationists. I talked with Vince Sortman, who was the Biohabitats director, who came in and did all this reconstruction in the park. I also spoke for 40 minutes with Christopher Jensen from Canyon Environmental, he completely did an inventory of the park. And based on his work, he turned it over to Vince Sortman at Biohabitats. And because he knew exactly Vince, what was in the park, he then used Christopher's work to go and just extract so many things. This is what Christopher told me he said to Vince when he found out what Vince wanted to do. And I'm quoting direct: "If you, meaning Biohabitats, do what you are planning to do, it will obliterate the park." Think about what this means, because it will not be the park that you now have. Once these trees are removed, it will take decades to recreate this park. And I could go on, I won't, but let me just say in summary that 75% of the park, and this was part of Christopher's inventory, is non-native. And Vince's intent was to just obliterate non-native trees and vegetation. Well, the park would be gone. And you can understand how difficult it would be to try to keep up with that model. And what happened in all of this is we lost trees that I don't think are, you know, injurious, like the black locust, and we could have a long discussion about that. But we lost, and Christopher went on to explain the different structure of the park in terms of the canopy, the attraction of bees, the attraction of owls. I mean, he went through, I talked with him for 40 minutes about what that park was in 2014 and what it is now. My point in all of this, and I appreciate, by the way, I in no way mean disrespect to Cat or public lands, because I think we've had a great relationship with Tyler Murdoch and the whole team. They gave us, we asked for a moratorium. They were granted a moratorium last year. No more cutting, and especially in bird nesting season, which the Audubon Society and even Tracy Aviary has said we should not do, and the poisoning of different plants and so forth. And so they did grant us, they are listening to us, we are making progress. We can't go back, but we can go forward. My point in all of this is I respect what Cat and PL is proposing to us. Much of it is for human interactions, for humans to maybe enjoy the park experience more. Some of it is essential. I'm in favor of what you're suggesting with the walls. I think there's some maintenance that needs to take place. Absolutely. Do I agree with all of it? I think the emphasis ought to be on ecology, the birds, the bees, the vegetation, the stream bed, and many other things that we could sort of somehow try to put back together. It's Humpty Dumpty. We won't be able to do it all, but my emphasis is really more environmental. Whether or not we can use the money for those purposes, Kat and I have had discussions about what we might have to go outside of this grant to get it, but it's one of the things that I would like to emphasize. I'm going to stop. I've said my speech, and would like to hear from the public right now. If you would just raise your hand, there's a little hand signal on the reaction thing, the reaction button below. If you would just tell us that you want to speak, I think we'd like to hear from the public. Tom Lunn. Tom, unmute.
As I put myself in Jim's position, I would feel like I'd written I'd taken a test and passed it with an A+, and then it got hijacked and taken away from me. I don't know if there's a way to get back to that original, original model that was approved. But if there is, that would be great. But it feels like it feels like a lot of the original stream bed was just taken away, and that's really altered so many things. But I can tell you that upper trail is full of peril, and when you make it, when you make it accessible to get into trouble, and then you get down into it and it gets really steep, I think we're just asking for problems. And I haven't surveyed the land. I don't know, Jim. Jim's saying that it's on private property and stuff. I don't know about that, but I do know that steep trail, that luge as they call it, is very hazardous. And if maintaining or restoring, I should say, the original trail near the stream where children could actually see the water and hopefully some wildlife, that hasn't appealed to me, but I don't know why it was tabled. That's all.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? I want to clarify what you said, Tom, just a little bit. The reason for that steep 50% ramp, which is completely illegal, the reason for that is that the city realized, having not done a survey, that for them to have continued to follow the WPA wall, they would have entered private property, okay? Not only entered private property, but they would have also attempted to traverse a very, very fragile slope that was subject to a lawsuit in the 1950s by Professor John Flynn, who happened to live in the house at that time. So, I mean, we're talking about some fairly serious matters. Now, another thing that kind of bothers me a little bit because of my health condition is that the city demolished EPA oil monitoring stations that were mandated by the federal government and the state toxicology people. And there doesn't appear to be any attempt to address that and put those back in place. Those are necessary as an early warning system should there ever be another oil spill. And those have been obliterated.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions? This is a quiet group. We definitely want to have, I think, a lively public involvement in this. And, you know, it's winter. It's hard to think about a park. Although today it felt like spring. But, you know, as the temperature kind of improves, what I hope, Kat and Dan and Hannah, is, you know, we may want to have, as I say, some kind of a community event in Yellcrest, not to go around what you're doing. In fact, we would invite you to be with us if we do something like that, and get the word out, maybe in a way that covers more of the residents, so that we can be sure that we're hearing and listening to as many as possible.
One last thing, this is Jim. I would make myself available to anybody who would like to walk down there and see firsthand what some of these concerns are, and also see what our objectives were in writing this CIP. I'd be happy to do that at any point.
I do want to just make one comment about the monitoring of the oil. I think we are monitoring the oil at different places. So I think we have just some not full information, but they are monitoring the oil at different places throughout the system. So that is being done, and they have had, because we've had this question come up before, and I remember having a conversation with Robin Carvajal and others, but we are monitoring the water itself and anything coming into the stream system. So that is being done on a regular basis.
That's good to do.
Yeah. But Jan, I'm more than happy to go after the survey and after we go through that stuff when the weather's nice, to basically do what we did at one time. It seems like 10 years ago. When we sat down and we sat down there and we went to the map. So I would love to do that again.
Some of the good things, and I'll just wrap up really quick. And I think, Kat, you wanted to say something. So remind me that remind me of that. Some of the good things that happened last year, we got a moratorium on the park. We stopped, there was no cutting of trees, there was no poisoning of trees. We actually laid a lot of gravel on the trail, a group of, volunteers. We did some weeding last year in the park, and then Amy at Tree Utah, bless her heart, came out, and Dan, you were there in the rain.
Josh was there.
Josh was there and planted trees and bushes. And that's, I guess, the point that I was trying to make, is that's really the direction that I would like to see us go. Van Hoover, who's also with PL, has promised that we will have a spring planting in Miller Park and get that on the schedule, as other districts and other parks have. And I want us to get in line and have that be an annual opportunity for us as well to sort of address that. Kat, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I just had two more points. I think one, We do have the petition on file for the lower trail that we'll include in our brief to City Council, but I would also encourage other members, if that's a high priority project, to include that in a survey response. That's kind of a great way for us to keep track of every response that we get in writing. So I would encourage you to fill out the survey and include that there. And then Jan, I totally agree to your point. I understand the confines of this funding source, but I did come prepared. I kind of chatted with Tyler Murdoch a little before this, and there are opportunities for other sources of funding within public lands to fund plantings and events like that. And I was going to bring up Van, and public lands was absolutely supportive of those efforts, and we would love to be involved there. So yeah, if it's outside of this funding request, there are definitely other avenues, and we'd love to explore those priorities with you as well.
Great. Well, I guess we'll get started with the process. We have about a month. My only concern, and it's something, even as well as I know the park, as I look at some of these projects, to fully understand what it will mean, and I think you've added some cost estimates of what they will cost, but in terms of what the real impact is going to be, in terms of what it looks like now, even though they're drawings, and the impact that'll have, I think that even Dan, not Dan, but Jim mentioned that because you want to put a whole new set of stairs, I think, in one area of the park. And again, my concern is about this human intervention. You know, do we want the park to be kind of more that mellow, raw nature type experience? The more that we do this human intervention, what is that going to do to the park? This is, again, my perspective. Others may feel differently, but I think maybe have future conversations with you, Kat, in the next little while to really understand, because people are going to be voting on things, and do they have, the full picture, and that's all.
No, that's a great point. And I think, to reiterate, this is kind of like the first phase of conceptual project proposals that we'll prioritize. Once that is done, and if projects get approved by City Council, we will be working very closely with this community throughout the whole design, so that if issues arise and there are things that we need to balance with the design or potentially revisit some of the other projects, we can absolutely do that. This just kind of gives us an overall initial look at what the community would prioritize, but I do appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Anything else that anybody would like to say before we finish? If not, this is a quiet group tonight. I guess we should be happy about that. Thank you all for coming. We will take this up again. Really, this is very, very important. I think it's a beautiful little park. It's a gem, and I think everyone is headed in the right direction to want to do the right thing for it. And thank you for coming tonight. And we will keep you posted on some of the next steps, and just remind everybody about those public opportunities at Anderson Foothill. Thank you all.
Great.
Have a great evening.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks, Jan.
Jan. Thanks, Jan.